Hi, great to be here today. It's been a while. Today, I'd love to see if you're here. So if you wouldn't mind just to punch in and let me know your name and where you're from, and I'll recognize people throughout as I always do. Today, we are going to be talking about distinctions. We're going to be talking about distinctions. Here is something that I really enjoy. I enjoy things that are different or similar but different. And part of leadership is managing conflict, and you can't manage what you don't understand. So, what's going to help you understand things, the situations more, is learning how to make distinctions. So, this is building the skill of making distinctions, which is a critical thinking skill. And what it does for you is it's going to make you make better decisions and manage your conflicts. So, I'm going to talk about four today. Distinctions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to name those distinctions. I'll continue to rename them throughout, just in case you join a little bit late. I'm going to give you some ways to look at these distinctions if you're struggling in one of these areas, and then an action item for each. I'm seeing people come in. I'm really excited. Hi, Sandra. I'll do this like I always do. Hey, Sandra. Um, hey, someone I talk to quite often, Sayed. Nicholas, hi from Montreal. A lot of people coming on now. Deleuze from Portugal. One of my programs was translated into Portugal, one of my LinkedIn programs. Amanda, hi from Brazil. Okay, so again, today is about how making distinctions reduces conflict. It also makes you a more critical thinker. I'm going to give you the four distinctions that we're going to talk about, and then I'll go into depth with each one like I always do. So the first one is identity versus title. In this, I'm specifically talking about leadership identity versus just having the title as leader. So this is going to help you if you're a new leader or if you are over leaders and you're promoting leaders. This is going to help a lot. Understanding the distinction between identity and title. I'm talking about that in my new book, Leadership Identity. The new book is From Conflict to Courage. It's coming out before too long. And so I'm talking a lot about identity versus title. The second distinction is process versus end result. Process versus end result. Sometimes people talk too much about the process and they should be talking about the end result, or vice versa. We're going to talk about those distinctions and how that's going to help you reduce conflict. The third one is perception versus observation. That's a big one when it comes to conflict, being able to identify when someone's talking, whether it's really just an observation or whether it's a narrative, a story, a perception, an assumption. That's probably the greatest one on listening for managing conflict. And then finally, accountability versus responsibility. That is if we have time. I don't like to go more than 30 minutes. I don't think most of us have more than that to devote to these LinkedIn Lives. Hi, Alicia. Hi, Lietita. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And hello, Helen. Welcome, everybody that's just joining. So the first one, and let me just skip here for a second and see if I've got some notes I want to be able to pull up. That's not it. Okay, well, we'll work off of here we go. All right, I've got them now. I like to have a few notes so that I can stay on task. So the first distinction that I want to talk about is identity versus title. Here's what I have learned over the last several years and really in my own journey. It's that identity drives behavior. So the way that we behave, the way that we act, the things that we do, if you look back at how we view ourselves, that's our identity, who we think we are. And in the book, I talk about three different leadership identities that are not so helpful. One is the hands-off leader, another is the hero leader, and then finally the best friend leader. And so when you are not identifying as a leader and you have the title, let's say you've been newly promoted, what happens is you still identify, the new leader still identifies as their peers, as one of them, even though they've been promoted. That is, unless there's some sort of a staged orientation or some sort of certifications that lead up to thinking that you're a leader, because you'll still identify with the problems and the situations of the people that you lead, which is not a bad thing, but you have to align also once you become a leader to the organization, to the executive decisions. So it can be kind of a tough switch in your identity. And in turn, if you identify as a nice leader, if I see myself as really nice, it might be hard for me to have a conversation that feels a little bit mean. Maybe if I have to tell you that you need to improve performance and I don't know how to position it, it will seem cruel to do that when in reality you're helping someone to grow. So if you identify as nice, that's going to be a problem. Here's another situation that I see sometimes. That is those who do take initiative and they really do identify with being a leader, but they don't have the title yet. What that can create, if there's no way for advancement, that can create some resentment for not being noticed, or it can even create a situation where others view you as a know it all. Because they don't see you as a leader yet, even though you identify with that. So the point here is that identity and leadership cannot compete. They have to align. They have to align. You have to have the title, and others have to see you as a leader, and you have to see yourself as a leader in order to be really effective. So you need to understand those distinctions of, do I see myself as a leader? Is my identity aligned with things that leaders would do? Or do I identify with being a peer, being a worker bee where I was before? Because when you're working on your own, maybe you outshine everyone else, but when you become a leader, it's about supporting others and helping them to shine. So that can be a difficult transition. And I'm going to give you some signs, and this is assuming that you have the title. So I'm going to assume in these signs that you have the title, but that you might be in an identity trap. This is only for your growth or for helping you to grow someone that's under you so that you can see what's going on if they were great workers, but they're not a great leader. So this is when the leader continues to do their work for them, agreeing with excuses, coaching the other person, but never seeing results. That's an identity issue because you're not holding them accountable. You continue to nudge them to take initiative, but they don't. You feel sorry for them. So those are some of the signs that you might be in an identity trap. So here's the action. Okay, I'm going to give you an action item, then I'm going to check in and regroup for a second. So the action is, you ask yourself, if you're the leader and you feel like you've got an identity crisis going on, do I want their success more than they do? Do I want their success more than they do? Because that is a problem. That is being a rescuer instead of a leader, because leaders have to have difficult conversations. Leaders have to figure out what the root problem is. Leaders have to think like a consultant. They have to make these distinctions versus perceptions, which we're going to get into in a minute. So what you want to do is you want to initiate a meeting and you want to own the part that you played, set some new ground rules and consequences of not following through. Then what you have to do is, after you've initiated the meeting, and I do give a blueprint in the new book of how to initiate a performance conversation that's very supportive, and it gives you every step and every place you are in the conversation. I feel that sometimes the reasons that we don't initiate conversations is we're afraid we're going to get off track and get distracted, which happens all the time. So you want to follow through 2 weeks later, 1 week later, a month later, whatever seems appropriate, and then you want to check back in, because if you don't, you're not creating accountability. Okay, so I'm going to check in just for a second, like I always do. Hi, Alicia. Hi, Trish. Hi, Slava. Hey, a friend of mine from a long time ago when I first started, Erica. Hey, great to see you here, Erica. Um, so I'm going to go over again the four pieces. Okay, identity versus title. We just went through that. The second one is process versus end result. The third one is perception versus observation. And the fourth is accountability versus responsibility. Okay. So let's now talk about the process versus the result. This has become so important in my coaching world. I have noticed that a lot of people continue to talk about the process when they should be first talking about the end result. So here's what I want to say about that. There's a time to talk about the how to, which is the process, and a time to talk about the end result. And knowing that distinction is going to help you be such a critical decision maker, especially when it comes to managing conflict or setting priorities. Here's the essence. You want to know the difference between what you want and how to do it. The problem I see from the top to the lowest level of leadership, frontline leadership, I shouldn't say lowest level, but from the beginning leader to the top, here's what I see as a problem: talking about how to do something before we understand what we really want. So the end result is about the what, and the process is about the how. Process is very important, but if you start jumping into problem solving and process before you've clearly defined the beginning and the end, you're going to really struggle. And here's why: the end result drives the process. The what determines the how. If you know my work at all, you know that I talk about a boat, an island, and a shark. The boat is our starting place, the island is where we're going, the shark is the obstacle. So between the boat and the island is the how to, that's the process. And if we're doing something brand new, the what or the island is going to determine the how, the process. When we try to figure out process first, we make big mistakes and we create conflict. So end result is about what, process is about how. The end result drives the process, the what determines the how. So if you're talking process too early, I call that getting stuck on the rock called how. And I'm going to explain it. Then I've got a little visual for you. If you're getting stuck in anything, you're probably too worried about how to do something versus clearly defining the end result and the current situation. So it's the inability to describe the situation. It's talking about solutions before describing the end result. This, I want to share with you how this happens for me. Someone calls me, they've got some what they call drama, because I've written books on drama. We've got some drama, we're not getting along, we want a workshop. A workshop is a how to, that's an initiative, but we haven't fully explored what the problem is and what the end result is. So, workshop and initiatives, new titles and roles, that's all process, and it should serve the end result versus deciding that's what's going to fix something. Arguments that never resolve is an issue of not understanding end result versus process versus end result. Asking about price before talking about value. What's the price of a workshop? What's the price of working with you as a consultant? What's the price? What we always want to know why we're doing something and what that value is. And then also actions that lead to circular movement. So what here's the action. Here's the action item. You want to define the situation first and then define the end result. So you define the situation, you define the end result. The process, if you're doing something new, will reveal itself to you. Then you have a process, and then you can look at process to see where mistakes are being made. But if the end result ever changes, you're going to have to work on process again because it's going to be different if you have a new end result. So I want to show you something. I always try to do a little bit of visual on here. I made a banner for you to look at. Let's see if I can find that. Here it is. This is what I call getting stuck on the rock called how. So you see the island, we're trying to get there, but instead we're all stuck on, but how do I do it? How do I do it? What should I do? Let's create a new officer of people. Let's create a workshop. Let's do a new initiative. Let's do a project. And very often those things do not lead to the what that you were wanting. So that's an example of getting stuck on the rock called how. That's when you're constantly talking about how to do something, but it's not working for you. So we're going to go to I'm going to check in real quick because I feel like I'm not recognizing. I know I got a lot of more people showing up. Hi, Marianne. I think I've said hi already to you. And please check in if you haven't. I will look at this later. I will check in after I've recorded this. And if you've got questions or you've got comments, glad to answer those later. Okay, so now we've talked about the first two. Role versus identity and process versus result. And so now I want to talk about perception versus observation. And I told you that this was one of the most important, when it comes to managing conflict. This is really a distinction of looking at the difference between the emotional brain and the logical brain. What you need to do here is listen to language. If you or someone else that you're coaching, we all have to have self-awareness. So if we say things like, well, they don't care, or he isn't engaged, or she thinks she's above it all, your emotional brain is making assumptions based on something that triggered you, something that you've had in your past. And so you're making these assumptions, and they may be grounded assumptions, they may be, but it's not going to help you resolve the conflict if you're just working from your assumptions because you're believing things that possibly aren't true. So what you want to do is you want to be able to know if you're operating from like your limbic system, which is what's triggering all the emotions, or if you're working just from observation. And then maybe there's a story to it, maybe not. And so here's how to know if you're operating from your emotions. You're harboring resentment against an employee. You're avoiding conversations because you already know what they're going to say. You see, that's an assumption. Even though you have a history, it's because we enter from the same emotional space that we did, that they say the same things. When we change, they often change too. Moving employees around on the chessboard, like, okay, they're not getting along in this department, so I'm just going to move them around. That's avoiding the problem. It's going to be another problem somewhere else. And also, it's not increasing your own courage. So, moving employees around, initiating global conversations with everyone instead of addressing the issue head on. All these are bullet points to say if you're struggling with the distinction between perception and observation. So it's different to say I observed something. I observed something and I perceive that it means this versus you don't care, you did that on purpose. The observation is you slammed the door and you folded your arms, and the story I'm telling myself is that you're very angry with me or you're frustrated or at capacity. When you use those two things together, it defines the conversation, and it's a lot better for resolving conflict versus saying I know your intention and that's exactly what this means, which is what we all resort to whenever we're in our emotional brain. And then finally, retaliation. I believe that sometimes we retaliate and don't even know that's what we're doing. We're just it's because we're clueless about our own resentment. And so we have to get really self-aware about how we feel so that we're not operating off of the emotional brain. So here's the action. The action is increase self-awareness and listen to your language. Stop making assumptions. Use the language that I've already talked about. My perception is, or what I've observed, and then ask yourself, is this a perception or is this an observation? So we've already plowed through 3 of these. I want to check in to see if there's any other people here. Hi, Phil from the UK. Hi, Odette. And hi, Anna. Oh, there's someone else. Hi. Hi, Anna. Anna Dos Santos. That sounds neat. Okay, so we've done the first 3. We're going to go to the 4th one, which is accountability versus responsibility. And I talked about this in my, I think it was my 3rd book, No Drama Leadership: How Enlightened Leaders Transform Culture in the Workplace. And what I wanted to dig into this topic because I always struggled with the distinctions, and we use these words interchangeably. So my suggestion in the book was to make a distinction between accountability and responsibility so that we're speaking very clearly about what's really going on. And I noticed in my work that people tend to fear accountability. Oh, I'm going to hold them accountable. They need to be held accountable. We talk about accountability as if it's a punishment. And I thought, well, there's a problem already baked into accountability if that's how we see it. So this is how I created my um, thought leadership, I guess, for accountability versus responsibility. What I'm saying here is that no one else is wrong. If someone else views it a different way, it's fine. I always tell my clients, pick a guru or a teacher or a consultant that you want to learn from and adopt that. It's not that there's another wrong way of doing it. It's just pick something so it's consistent. So I say that with all due respect to anyone who sees this differently, but this has helped me tremendously of understanding the difference between accountability and responsibility. Responsibility, the way that I position it, is of the heart. It's about ownership. I take ownership. I'm responsible for this. Accountability is of the head. So responsibility is about ownership. Accountability is about measurement. With accountability, there's always some tools of accountability, some sort of measurement, and that almost always includes what I call a witness. There's always a boss, another person that says, yes, we agree that this is how it's supposed to be. I liken it to something very common for many of us. If you've ever been on a weight management program, like you go to Jenny Craig or you go to Weight Watchers, you're responsible for your own health and for what you eat. That belongs to you. No one can force you to eat a certain thing. You've chosen to do that. But if you want to be accountable with it, not to say you can't still have results without accountability, but if you want to be accountable, you're measuring it. You're checking in. There's someone that's looking at the scales with you, and they're not there to punish. They're to say you did it or you didn't. Let's look at why it's not working, or let's look at why this is working so well. Accountability gives you the understanding of why something's working. It gives you the ability to course correct. So I have come up with this. Someone said this, I think, actually in one of my workshops, and I thought this is brilliant. They said accountability is something you can demand, but responsibility is something you accept. So think about that. Accountability is something you can demand, but responsibility is something that you accept. And if you accept responsibility, you'll probably want accountability because it helps you to get better. You're not looking at it as punishment or failure. So, how do you know if you have an accountability problem? Well, I want to show you a little visual first. I made one for this one too. So, let me go find that. Here's the visual. So, accountability versus responsibility, head versus heart. I hope that's helpful. Um, so how do you know if you have an accountability problem? Well, here's my bullet points. People skew the numbers to make their quotas. That means they're just trying to meet the numbers. There's no real heart in it. They don't really take responsibility. They're not curious or upset as to why they didn't get it. They just want it to be okay with the boss. It's a checklist. Employees are afraid to admit mistakes. You know, I worked in manufacturing where supposedly there were rules of accountability, but employees cheated on weights and measurements because you got in trouble if it wasn't right. Even if it wasn't your fault, people would just kind of skew the numbers, skew the weights. They would put tape over the electric eyes so that things would go through that didn't weigh right. And that was just because if you tell the truth about it, the system is such that it's not really there to figure out what's going wrong. It's there to get you in trouble. So look at your systems of accountability and if it's about getting in trouble or is it about course correcting and learning. There's always a lack of engagement or initiative if you have an accountability problem. People are just complying. They're doing what they do what they do. Um, Hi there, Kelly. Saw some from Springfield, Missouri. I was excited about that. That's where I live. Hi, Muhammad. Okay, so accountability. They skew the numbers. They're afraid to admit mistakes. There's a lack of engagement or initiative. Blame is rampant, and you're always fixing other people's mistakes, which means you're rescuing. And we've talked a little bit about that with title versus identity. So here's the action item for you if you want to take this on. And I'd love to hear from you if you do it. If you do any of these things, I'd love for you to do this. And by the way, if you're finding value in this, I know this is kind of a conceptual program that I'm doing today. It's a little bit more in the invisible realm, but if you're finding value in this, would you share it on your own thread and invite people to watch it later? That way you can have conversations with other people about this. The action is that you want to use the words responsibility and accountability very intentionally. Yeah, someone says a paycheck versus making a difference in people's lives. Absolutely. I'm just here to bide my time. Even people that are my age and are in retirement, they're just there to collect their paychecks so they can retire versus taking this ownership of I've still got a lot left in me to give. Um, so someone said you missed. I will not miss you now. Hi there. um, so use the words responsibility and accountability very intentionally. Accountability is not punishment. It's really not meant to be that, even though we say hold people accountable. That means we're going to measure, and if you can't do it, we're going to figure out why. Okay. Um, the measurement actually helps you course correct. This is why when you create an accountable culture, you are giving feedback, you're doing measurements, you're looking at. I used to not like accountability because I had a different meaning about it, but I look at it now as really fun to see how much more I'm improving. Whether it's working on a stationary bike, I'm trying to strengthen some of my muscles around my knees because I've had a stem cell replacement. And so I'm excited about my own measurement. Am I increasing strength? Am I doing more than I feel like I can? Now, I don't have a coach saying you're doing it or not. So I'm kind of having what I call enlightened accountability. I'm keeping myself accountable, but in truth, I'm being responsible for my results. If I really wanted accountability, I would join a club and have a witness to watch me. But accountability and the head and the heart, accountability and responsibility, head and heart, if they work together, you've got magic. You've really got magic. Someone says, yes, I agree. And glad to see a lot of people from Canada today. So here is the conclusion. Where there's conflict or ineffective decision making, find two similar concepts, ideas, or components, and then look for distinctions. A lot of times in consulting, we create a double matrix and try to figure out what's in the quadrants. That can be very helpful. I'm not teaching that today, but being able to say, is there responsibility? Yes or no? Is there accountability, yes or no? Then you have 4 quadrants that tells you what's going on. So that's one way of using critical thinking with the distinctions, is that you can take 2 points of interest and you can have 4 different quadrants of what's showing up, and it can help you with your decision making. So when you take those kind of components, you create distinctions, and it's in those distinctions that you can really tap into the root problem, and you can make a better decision, and you can manage conflict before it gets out of hand because of the lack of awareness, or um, because of the avoidance that's going on. Gear seems to be also behind the conflict. I'm not sure what you mean there. If you want to say something later, maybe you're saying equipment. Resources definitely can be, if that's what you mean. Oh, you meant fear. Okay. I get it. Those stupid correcting on the when you're typing. Yes, fear. Yes, absolutely. Fear is what keeps us from addressing issues, because we don't like how we feel. We're afraid of how someone else is going to feel, and our emotional brain gets in the way. So in my mind, creating distinctions opens up a conversation more of curiosity, and more about, here's how I see it. How do you see it? This is how I'm encoding this in my brain. Because once you make distinctions, you have a real conversation. If you don't have distinctions and you're calling responsibility and accountability the same, if you're calling title and identity the same, if you're calling process and results the same, you are going to have a lot of conflict because you're talking different language. I have to do that with my clients all the time whenever they come to me and they demand a workshop or an initiative. And I say, well, let's back up a minute. I get it. That's what you think is going to work, but we're in the how right now, and that comes later. The end result always drives the how. So that kind of thinking is going to help you to be a much better leader and more clear. Um, LinkedIn user says, I agree. It certainly can be part of the problem. Yes. And here's someone else that says blame comes with lack of understanding and fear. Yes, it does, because blame initially feels better. As long as there's something to blame, I don't have to take responsibility, and I don't have to do the courageous work of looking in the mirror to correct myself. And I often say that truth and really self-awareness is an acquired taste, because you will feel aversion sometimes when you're growing. And I've kind of realized now at this point in my life, it's okay to feel bad. It's okay to feel some aversion. I'll get over it. There's always counseling if need be. But yes, and Kaylee, so true. It's better to approach the difficult conversations as soon as possible, as long as you aren't too emotional. Yes, get your emotions, like get that cleaned up and get clear. This is, again, that same clarity about the end result. If you can get clear, not about how hurt you are, we know that, you know that, how you feel. If you can get clear about what you want, what you don't want, and what's happening now. And I teach that in the book as well, like what's happening that shouldn't be happening, what's not happening that should be happening, and how is it affecting the business. If you can get clear on that, you can resolve almost anything. Um, Here's someone that says, yes, I talk a lot about resistance. I talk a lot about resistance. So here is the call to action. I'm just going to say, share this on your own thread. If you got value, add your own 2 cents about what you've learned, any distinctions you see, even in addition to what you do now. In addition to these 4, there's all kinds of distinctions. I could make a program on 20 distinctions. So if you've got other distinctions that have helped your leadership, share it with the group. It's going to help us all to grow. Share this on your own thread, add your 2 cents. If you want to, go to my website at marlenechisholm.com. It's right there on the screen. It's scrolling. If you want to, you can get on my list. I have one of my previous programs that I did on trust. There's a learning guide with that. So you can see that, and then you'll be on the list for when the book comes out. And the book is, I'm so excited. So on the day of launch, I'll be doing an overview of the book. I believe that's going to be May 3rd. So stay tuned for that. But if there's also a link on my website where it says book, you can get a free sample chapter. It kind of gives you the table of contents and what to expect. And then you can also go pre-order. It's called From Conflict to Courage, How to Stop Avoiding and Start Leading. I think it's some of my best work. I just finished with the audio recording. And then also in the future, I have a new piece of work that's coming out with LinkedIn Learning. And it's about, I'm not sure the exact title, but stay tuned because it's coming. But it's about getting results and managing conflict in a hybrid workplace. We just recorded that this last week here at my home because they're not flying people out to California right now because of COVID. So thank you for joining me. looking forward to seeing your comments and for sharing this on your own thread. And I'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.